He has flown more than 4,100 hours in all sorts of aircraft. He received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in November 2005. General Myers holds a mechanical engineering degree from Kansas State and a master's degree in business administration from Auburn University. A native of Kansas City, he and his wife have 3 children. General, what in your view is the most serious national security threat facing our nation today?
I think it remains the threat from violent extremism. I don't think we can deny that threat, if you take people that are absolutely ruthless, that it does not bother their conscience to kill innocent men, women, and children, and they don't mind dying in the process of carrying out their activities. And you combine that with potentially very powerful weapons, either fissile material that's used in a nuclear weapon or fissile material that's used in a radiological device or biological weapons or chemical weapons. If they could find those weapons, they would certainly use them, and it would make what happened on 9/11, as great as that tragedy was, 3,000 people losing their lives in one event, you could have even greater tragedies, of course. So I think violent extremism, this extreme view of a religion and what they want to do in the world, is our greatest danger.
You recently wrote an article about this in a Washington newspaper in which you argued that the lack of a comprehensive global strategy to deal with this has been a problem since 9/11. You went on to say, the threat from violent extremism is an existential threat to the United States and our friends and allies. America's security is at risk. It's time to develop this strategy now. Why do you think 8 years after 9/11 we haven't, and what aren't we doing that we should be doing?
Well, I think it's kind of how we humans prioritize our work, and often if you have a lot of immediate problems, that's what you attend to. You attend to the immediate, and the more important problem that takes more thought and more time to develop, you put off till tomorrow. Well, I'll do that tomorrow. But the immediate keeps coming back, and we know that in our daily personal lives. The immediate always sort of overwhelms sometimes the ability to think, to read, to do things we'd like to do because we're caught up in the day-to-day events. And I think, in a way, that happens in our government as well. And so it became pretty clear to me towards the end of my tenure as chairman that we were being over-reliant on the military instrument of national power, and that the diplomatic and political instrument, that the economic instrument needed to play just as heavily in our activities in Iraq and Afghanistan as did the military instrument. And it was a frustration that we could never develop a strategic view that would harness all those instruments of national power. And by the way, it's not just the United States, it's our international friends and partners that have to harness their instruments of national power to bring to bear on this problem of violent extremism. Violent extremism will not go away just through military force. It won't go away just because of economic progress or political progress in a given country. It's going to have to be all of that with a concerted effort by the international community to do probably as much as we can do, which will be to diminish this threat so it's not as prevalent as it is today. It's just but it's going to take probably the U.S. leadership, I would say, or at least the U.S. prodding folks to. And
if there's one or two things that you think this president or this administration should do to address this problem, what would that be?
Well, I'm out of office now, and so, but I think any president should probably set aside some really smart folks and get to thinking about, is there a strategy we could develop, the overarching strategy that would be bigger than what I call the tactical fights in Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, they're very important efforts, extremely important efforts, but there's a bigger effort that we ought to think about is how do we deal with violent extremism? What are the fundamentals that are involved here? What over the next probably several decades, much like the Cold War was 5 decades, violent extremism, if you're going to be successful against it, I think will probably be decades-long sort of effort. And I'm not talking about military effort. I'm not talking about lots of troops. I'm talking about a comprehensive effort of all our instruments of national power. So the president puts together a group, and then he finds somebody, once he decides, and this will be an international effort, once he kind of gets some consensus on where we're going to go, somebody's got to be in charge, certainly in this country, to be in charge of this effort. And that's hard in our form of government to find somebody, that can harness all our instruments of power. We know how to harness the military. That's the Department of Defense, that's Secretary Gates, that's the chairman, those are the combatant commanders. It's much more difficult when you're talking about economic and political and diplomatic power.
I have to ask you, General, about something which is far more tactical than at this strategic level. But because we're on a military base and given your history, I'd like to ask you about the incident at the heinous incident at Fort Hood. In your view, was this an act of terrorism?
I don't think we know yet. I mean, there's some. What I get is I'm just reading the press reports like everybody else, I guess. So. I guess that's the question. Is this just a person that was mentally unbalanced that broke and snapped and did what other people like that have done around the world, or was it more premeditated? Was it an act of terrorism? And I think the group, they have a group now looking at that to determine that. I mean, law enforcement and others to find out what really was behind this, and it'll be difficult because this is a complex case, but there's certainly some indications that looks like it might have been an act of terrorism. Somebody had some very strong beliefs.
General Myers, thank you very much for joining us in Dakhel, Washington.
Thank you.